Welcome to the Rock Your Comeback podcast. I'm Nicole Eaton, author of the books Rock Your Soul and Rock Your Comeback, as well as an intuitive therapist, and I'm here to remind you of your power. This podcast focuses on mindset and inviting the universe in to create a life that feels so good, so aligned, and so authentic. I hope you're ready. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Rock Your Comeback podcast. This episode is so good, so juicy. I was able to sit down with Dr. Justin Mosley and we talk all about finding your purpose, rewriting your story, and truly tapping into your power. It's a fantastic episode from start to finish. You're going to want to listen to it. You can support this podcast by leaving a review, sharing with a friend. All of those things help this podcast stay alive and be free and accessible to you, and it means the world to me. So please pay it forward to somebody you love who needs to hear this episode. Share with a friend or leave a review. And also don't forget, I have a brand new November manifestation journal out. It is free to you, free, because it's important to me that you get clear about what you desire so that you can manifest one hell of a November. So you can find that in the show notes or over on my website. Also have my book available, Rock Your Comeback, the Down to Earth Guide to Reclaiming Your Power, and the Comeback Club, which is actively growing and so much fun. We're having so much fun over there on a weekly basis, doing courses and live Q&As and hanging out weekly chat, and it's such a good vibe. So if you're interested in joining any of those, they're in the links, and if you're interested in supporting this podcast, please do so. I'm forever grateful, and I always want to know what you think. Welcome back to the Rock Your Comeback podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Eaton, and I'm here today with Justin Mosley, aka the Mindset Doctor. He is a speaker, mindset transformation coach, and has been featured pretty much everywhere, ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox, and I'm ecstatic to share his knowledge with you guys today. So welcome, Justin.
Nicole, thanks for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
You know what I love about your messaging is that we actually share a really similar base message of, I want to help you step back into your power. That is my whole thing. And I've noticed that, like, I went through your content and I was like, wow, we are really aligned in that way. But I'm curious, like, what does power mean to you?
Yeah. And for me, where that comes from too, a mentor of mine told me, he's like, you are most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were. And for me, I struggled with self-confidence, self-esteem. I was introverted. Like, I wanted to speak on stages and influence people, but I had a tremendous fear of public speaking. So tons of limiting beliefs, all the things. I know you talk about that stuff as well. So for me, I had to overcome all of that. And it's led to so many more opportunities, so many more connections. Had I just believed the old stories, I never would be on this podcast with you. So for me, that was my power, like owning my power, taking responsibility for my life, overcoming the limiting beliefs and making things happen. I'm a testament of the work that goes into it. I want to help others do that so they can experience the abundant life that they were created to live. It's
hilarious that you say that, because when I've been on podcasts in the last couple of months, people are like, what did you write Rock Your Comeback for? And I'm like, I wrote it for me. I wrote it for me years ago as like a manual of like, if I had to go back and figure out how to dig myself out of this hole, it would be for me. And like, I hear you talking about who you were, you know, maybe a decade ago or maybe a little while ago. I love a good comeback story, and I know you have one. So I'd love if you'd share it with us.
Yeah. So I got married early on, and so early 20s, and ended up going through a divorce, and it rocked me because as a Christian, there was say, oh, Christians can't get divorced. And so there was a lot of shame and guilt and things that I was carrying around. And then finally I had my own kind of rock bottom moment when I was like, you know what? I want to be the best version of myself. I want to be someone who I'm going to be an amazing spouse, an amazing friend, all the things I created in my mind, who I wanted to become. And about the same time, I was in grad school at the time. I reached out to a mentor and I was like, what can I do now to be successful? And I thought he was going to give me some sage business advice, but really it was the most profound advice I'd ever had in my life. He said, if you want to be successful, you've got to work on yourself. And I took that to heart. Like, I started reading 100 books a year on mindset, personal development, leadership, sales, marketing, business, all the things, because I didn't want to just know about them. I wanted them to become a part of me. And because I dove in, I found books like Think and Grow Rich and Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within, which led me to Jim Rohn, who talked about if you want more, you've got to become more. So it just became this internal drive to become more so I could experience more. anymore. So that was really kind of a rock bottom moment. And then fast forward years later, we can talk about another one where I actually had a near-death accident, which led me to what I'm doing today. But really, it came from that hitting rock bottom led me to want to change.
I think that's true for so many people. And that's why I love like the work that we mutually are doing in the world is that you wouldn't be where you're at without some really awful things happening or some massive experiences that at the time I'm sure felt like, how am I going to get through this? What is the next day going to bring? I wasn't built to navigate this. And I call those black hole moments. And I feel like there's so many people here that need to listen to this podcast and see where you're at in your life and know that that was because of that black hole moment, because you had to figure out who you are. And I think that's like the cool thing is that we can transition into, okay, this is happening. I can get consumed by it. I can wither away inside of it or do what you did. And then I think community has a big part in that, is that when you're in darkness, it sounds like maybe you reached out for people to connect with to get some other perspectives.
Yeah, and community is huge because the reality is you're not in it alone. Everyone suffers, and most people suffer in silence when they're going through those moments. And we're afraid, we're ashamed, whatever the things around it, we don't want to reach out to other people. But reaching out to other people is so important because people have gone through it before you, and they can help you pull yourself out of it quicker. And there's levels of awareness you got to understand when you're going through it. One is life's not happening to you, it's happening for you. Anything you're going through. And it's hard to understand that in the moment when you're dealing with the stuff, but there is going to be certain lessons you learn that are going to transform your life later on. But that's usually where people stop. Life doesn't happen to me, it happens for me. But the next level is then life happens by me because your thoughts, your feelings, your actions are what you're creating. It's a reflection. Your outside world is a reflection of your inside world. So all the thoughts, all those limiting beliefs, all the things you're struggling through, you have to overcome them because you are creating your reality, and your past doesn't equal your future. The problem is it will continue to equal your future if you let it, but you can make a decision to decide today things are going to be different, and you can create a new reality for yourself. So life's not happening to you, it's happening for you, then it's happening by you, and lastly, it's happening through you. So not only is it affecting you in your own outer world, it's affecting others around you. So be cognizant of your thoughts, your feelings, the energy that you're bringing to the world, because it's going to change your world and the people around you.
That's so good. I love all of that. That's so good. And I love what you said about the past doesn't have to mean anything about your future unless you let it. And I think that's the idea of like having that victim mentality of the world is just happening to me and I can't escape it and all this bad stuff has happened to me. And I think so many people get stuck there. And I'm curious if you have some tactical ways that you suggest to get people back into their power from a victim mode.
Yeah. Well, again, know you're not alone. Most people go through that and at some point have been the victim, but realize that's just a story you've created. And I believe that people truly don't get what they want in life because of the stories they keep telling themselves of why they can't have it. So realizing it's just a story. There's no real meaning to this. Nothing has meaning until we give it meaning. So we place a meaning on our circumstances that I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not worthy enough, whatever the story is. So the first thing you have to do is create a new story. And one of the best things that you can do, it's all around your own identity. So if you can create a new identity of the person you want to become. So the best thing you can do is write down this question. It's one of the hardest ones, but what do you want? Most people can't answer that question. When you ask them what they want, they tell you all the things they don't want. Well, I don't want this. I don't want to work these hours or this job or these people around me, all the things I don't want. Well, find out what you truly do want. And I love the work you do. Tap into your intuition. Answers are all around you. So find out what do you want? And then here's the powerful question. Who do you need to become in order to achieve that? And when you really do the work on this, figure out who do you need to become? What is that person like? How do they show up? How do they use their energy, their body, their communication, whatever it is that that person has, the best version of yourself, and then go to work each day becoming that best version of yourself. And what you'll see is each day, if you just keep improving, keep getting better, you'll look back 6 months later and you'll be a completely different person. But it starts with answering the question, what do you want and who do you need to become to get it?
There's this thing where if you are really caught in your external, if you're really caught in the day-to-day and you've got your situations going on, that the power only comes to you when you can turn back inward, when you can come back and just check things out, see where your thoughts are at, see where your time is going, see where your focus is going. That is for me where I can easily get away from my power, especially when I'm traveling a lot. I'm just like over here and over there, and I'm trying to catch up on work when I'm getting back. And so there's always that moment where I'm like, oh, wait, I know that I function better if I can come back, sit with myself and say, what do I want? What do I need? And what am I going to do? But I love the idea of checking into what does your best self look like? And another another word I've been enjoying lately is, what does my favorite self look like? What is like,
Mm,
what's my favorite version of myself? What version like makes me feel good about who I am in the world? And that's been like
yeah.
my C word of the month of like, I wonder what she's up to, what she what she's playing with today,
Yeah.
what's in her joy too. I've been enjoying that.
I love that. And a story that just came to me that has to do with the stories we create around our circumstance that helps with the victim mode. So there's a story of these two brothers, and one brother ended up on drugs, alcohol, just strung out, ended up homeless. And the other brother became a very successful businessman. So we're like, they're on two ends of the spectrum. How did this happen? So they went to both brothers and they asked them, how did you end up like this? And both brothers had the exact same answer. I had an abusive father. One just chose to be a victim in that story and then believed I can't do anything in life because of what happened to me. The other brother said, no, I'm an overcomer. I'm not going to let what happened to me hold me back. And he went and made something of his life. So it's not the circumstance itself, it's the story, and the meaning you give it will determine what actually happens in the story of your life. And that's the thing, is that we're on in our own movie of our life, and most people are just playing a supporting cast and not the actual star in our own movie. And that's where I love like the best version of yourself. Like create that in your mind and truly ask yourself, how can I start to show up as that? Because that can change everything. You can actually star in your own movie.
I love it. I want to dive into your near death experience if that's cool, because
Yeah.
I was watching, I think it was your TED Talk. I was watching that you were talking about. It sounded like you were kind of at the top of your game when this happened. And I think it's
Yeah.
really important to differentiate. There's those rock bottom moments, and then there's moments that like do something to your soul that also change you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was at that point. I mean, I'm a chiropractor by trade. My wife and I, we'd built a successful chiropractic clinic. We were helping people, making a difference. And life was good. Marriage was good. Money was good. We were traveling, doing all the things. And then I went on a whitewater rafting trip and we got to the class 5 rapids. And I was sitting on the back of the raft. When we dropped into the rapids, our raft tipped over. And me being in the back, I got trapped under the rapid itself. And it just started pushing me underwater. And I still remember the sound of my helmet scraping down the rocks as I was just being pushed under. And the last thing I remember thinking is, I'm not coming back up. And then everything went black. And then everything went bright white. And it was the most peaceful, serene feeling I'd ever felt. And then in that moment, I heard the words, wake up. And thankfully I did, because I came back to consciousness and I was trapped underwater, wedged between two rocks. And one of the buckles on my life jacket had gotten trapped underneath one of the rocks. So I tried to push and I didn't budge. And I kept pushing and pushing. Thankfully, my adrenaline kicked in enough. I was able to push hard enough. I broke the buckle on my life jacket, floated to the top, and got swept down the river. And at that moment, I mean, I was rocked. And we all question our purpose in life. Like, why are we here? But at that moment, I asked a different question. I said, why am I still here? Because things could have been different. What if I didn't hear wake up? What if I wasn't strong enough to break free? So in that moment, I was like, no, I know there's something bigger for my life than just the routine that I was going through in day to day. So I was like, I know, yes, I'm helping people. I'm making a difference. That was my purpose, but I was playing way too small. And I knew if I truly wanted to step into the calling that was on my life, I need to exchange my comfort for my calling. And that became my message for others too, because I think we can get comfortable in success, but we can also get comfortable when things are not going well. We just get into these own comfort zones that we need to step out of to really truly step into the next thing that's for our lives.
I want to talk about that, but I also am curious if that changed your relationship with the idea of the universe or God or afterlife.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm a believer. And so I'm been spiritual all my life, and it's just a deeper connection. So for me, it wasn't an audible voice that I heard when I heard wake up. It was just that inner knowing, which for some people could be God, intuition, whatever it is. But for me, it was God. God told me to wake up. And it was a wake up call, not only in that moment, but it was a wake up call for my life, that I needed to do something different. And that's what I think we're all here, is kind of finding out what is our purpose? Like, what is the point of all of this? But I knew, like, in that moment, I asked, I was like, what if it all would have ended right then? Is this the legacy you want to leave? And the answer was no. I don't want to get to the end of my life and realize, oh, you could have become more. You could have done more. You could have helped more people. You could have made a bigger impact. I don't want to ask those questions. I want to say, no, you gave it your all. You helped people, you made a difference, and you made a huge impact. So that's what drives me to this day. But back to your earlier point, like, you don't need a near-death accident. You don't need a rock bottom moment in order to change. Like, you can do it now. Learn from my example. Learn from Nicole's example. You don't have to hit rock bottom in order to change. So that's why we're here. That's why we do this, to speak life into you. And if you are going through that moments, and there is definitely sunny days that are coming for you.
I think that's such an important thing to hear, because I do feel like those rock bottom moments don't
always have to happen. And maybe some of them do, right? Maybe some of them, but I am a true believer that sometimes things happen because we've stepped into this role where we're on autopilot and we're going through our life. And even if it's good, are you living up to your potential? Are you becoming the version of yourself that you were put on this earth to connect with, to become, to meet? And are you serving the world in the way you're meant to serve? And so I think when we're in these spaces, that if we can come back and we can use mortality motivation, we can use that idea that you don't have a lot of time here. I don't have any near-death experiences, but when I was growing up, I had a lot of early deaths. My cousin passed away when he was 17. My aunt passed away when she was 30. And between the time I was 10 and 12, I had probably 6 people pass per year. And it was all young people. It wasn't like, oh, they died of old age. It was wild car accidents and weird surgeries that went wrong. And it was all these crazy things. And so I grew up like really with a mindset, which I recognize later as some trauma, but I grew up with this mindset of like, well, I'm planning this vacation for 6 months, but who knows if I'm going to make it to that. And so that sort of in the back of my head for quite some time and still sometimes does, but I use it to my advantage of, okay, so if today were it, how am I going to find the most joy? How am I going to stop playing small? How am I going to live on purpose or be more intentional and present in my relationships? That's been something that the last couple of years I've just been honing in on. The phone goes away, the presence is there. We spend all the time with the girlies, with the spouse and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm curious how, obviously we watch how it impacted your business, but with your relationships, I'm curious what having a near-death experience changed for you.
Yeah, everything became more intentional. And I think that's back to your point. We do, like, whether it's one of the biggest things is where we lose a relationship or we lose a loved one. Then we start to contemplate life. Like, what did I just go through that relationship for? Life is very short. Like, especially losing loved ones, that's when we actually stop and contemplate, like, what is all this about? So one of the principles that I teach now that I learned from this was you need to live by intention, not by default. Too many people are on autopilot throughout the day. But if you show up being intentional, so you could use this as your example. If you show up to be intentional with your kids and you're actually thinking, what can I do today to create magic moments with them? It's completely different than just waking up, take them to school, feed them lunch, do all the things and just get to the end of the day and say, okay, we're going to repeat this again tomorrow. But if you're intentional to say, hey, what can we do to make this day special? Intuitively, you'll get answers to how to make it special. Is where you put your intention is what you give your attention. And where your focus goes, your energy flows. So when you show up to be intentional, whether it's to make a difference in someone's life, whether it's to bring your own joy and peace, like if you're intentional with it, you can make it happen. But so many people are just living on autopilot, living by default. So you got to live by intention, not by default.
And it's so easy to live by default. It's just, it's so
just to go
easy.
through the motions, right?
Yeah, and I think there's people like you and I who are just religiously growing and trying to grow and trying to learn more about ourselves so that we can. And this is your sign. If you are somebody who's began to recognize, I don't really feel good. I'm just going through my day. I'm getting through all the things that I'm getting through. This is your sign to become more intentional about your life, more intentional about what you're doing in the world. And I know you were talking earlier about exchanging your comfort for your calling. And how do people who haven't had a near-death experience, who are just in the process of getting more curious about being intentional or what more could be for them, what are some of the ways that you might suggest they connect with their calling?
Yeah, good question. And you reminded me of a quote. Bob Proctor talks about most people try to safely tiptoe through life, hoping to make it to death. Like they just try to just take it easy and just go through the motions. And reality is like you can make an impact right now. And when it comes to purpose, a lot of people just think I need to have some big Mother Teresa style purpose, or I need to start a nonprofit and help third world countries solve world hunger, something like that. The reality is you are here for a purpose right where you are. Your purpose could be to show up and put a smile at someone's face at work, the people that you're around. Maybe it's just to speak life into them because you never know. Like I recently lost a cousin to suicide and I didn't even know he was struggling. So you never know. If I would have given him a word of encouragement, something could have been different. So if you just show up intentional, and that's where the intuition comes in, answers are all around us. The question is, will you be quiet enough to listen for it? Because if you're listening, looking for opportunities, but then listening, you'll actually hear, oh, maybe you need to give them an encouraging word today. Or maybe hey, you need to go. Cool. I know you talk about intuition. So it's like maybe for some reason you need to drive to this place at this time and just be there. And you might not even know why. Like, why would I go do that? But it's for a reason. And that's where tapping into intuition, which I know you can speak all day on this, is one of the best things that you can do. And start by just being quiet. A lot of times, especially for people of faith, like they want to pray. Praying is great, but how much time are you spending just talking versus listening? Listening is a powerful part of prayer where you actually get the answers to what you've been looking for. So the more time you can spend in quiet, in peace, painting the picture of what can I do today, right now, not one day, 10 years from now, if I was here to change the world, you can change the world because you can affect somebody today and you never know. Like that guy, right, 15 years ago when I reached out to that mentor, that what he said, that one thing that he said on that one day changed the course of my life forever. That's changing the world. You have the opportunity to change the world, especially if you're a parent. Every day, you have the opportunity to change your kid's world. So look for the opportunities. They're all around you.
Yeah, praying is half the work. Listening is the other half. I love that. It's such an important point because we can talk at people, we can talk at God, we can talk all day, but when we get quiet, that's where we hear. And the thing is a lot of people they busy up their schedules and they don't actually create time for the things that make them feel more fulfilled. They don't free up the time for the things that bring them joy. They don't free up the time to stop and listen. And I've been doing a lot of work with a lot of different clients over the last couple of months of just let's reduce your schedule. Do we need all of those things? Are all of those things helping you, benefiting your family? Like a lot of times we subscribe to busyness because busyness is standard and normal. And I think that, in some regard, the COVID time period did us a favor and slowed us down, but now we're starting to see back up and we can honor both pieces that sometimes there are busy seasons, but what can be eliminated? What can help you slow down? What can help you come within? Even something as simple as turning off background noise. Like I have a neighbor who's got the TV going every single time in there. I mean, it's just going, it's just in the background and just turning that off, disconnecting from your phone, only responding to texts when you set the time period that you feel willing and able to do that. Creating boundaries for yourself in regards to your personal space inside of you and that internal space can all be a part of that learning to listen to your prayers coming back at you.
Yeah. And I think so many people, they wear what I call the badge of busy, where they get excited. It's like a badge of honor to be busy. I'm so busy. But busy is good. And it's like, yeah, busy can be good. You can be productive, but a lot of people are busy without being productive. They just filled their time with the distractions, social media. I know we both produce some great content, but sometimes it's like, we have to be intentional. Get on there, post your content and get off because it's designed to distract you, to find the next person's reel, what's going on with them and where are they? And then all of a sudden you've lost 30 minutes to an hour. You've got to protect your time. So those boundaries, and it goes back to being intentional and setting up, remember, putting yourself first because you can't serve others until you are filled up. You can't give out of an empty cup. So I travel a lot. So they give that speech before you take off on the plane. If the oxygen mask comes down, put your mask on first before helping others. That's what you have to do. Like be intentional. And a lot of it, because we're good-hearted. My mom's like one of the people who wants to serve everyone else, but she puts herself last. And it's a selfless thing. Like I want to just serve. The problem is you are actually wearing down because of this. So if you realize it actually helps you serve people even better if you take care of yourself, if you do those things that bring you joy, if you are filled up, you can serve at a much higher level. I think changing that mindset of serving yourself helps you serve others at a higher level might help you actually take more time for yourself.
Yeah. And as somebody who's a recovering people pleaser, like that message is so real. I mean, I had my daughter when I was 20 and there was this whole idea in my family that as a woman, if you don't have goals and dreams for yourself, it's all for your kid. I had a lot of pressure, a lot of demonstration, stay-at-home mom. I had a lot of limiting beliefs around what it meant to be a mom and what a good mom looked like. And so for the longest time, I was just burning myself out. I was going to school full time. I was working an internship part-time. I was coming home and just doing all the work. And then, at one point I was so burnt out that I was like, this cannot be what it is. And I had to learn how to I had to learn how to show my kids how to take care of themselves. How do you take quiet time when you need quiet time? How do you know when you need quiet time? It is a learning process for people who aren't taught.
For sure. Yeah. because distraction is all around us right now. I mean, social media teaches us how to be distracted. And then we take that distraction into our daily lives. Like you mentioned, just leaving the TV on. It's just noise in the background and commercials and all the stuff. It's programming us. And back in the day, they called them television programs because it programs you. It gets your brain waves into a state where they can put messages in front of you to actually program you. Well, you know what? You can actually program yourself and reprogram yourself from all the programming you've had over time if you give yourself the space and start to create your own affirmations of who you want to become and how to step into that. Create your own visualizations and mental rehearsal around who you want to become. You can reprogram yourself, but you've got to give yourself space.
Well, I'm curious if this is true for you as well. I notice when I consume more content, I create less. Like I don't feel as inspired or creative. It's like I get absorbed in other people's creativity. And then I'm either comparing it of like, oh, I don't even have any ideas right now. Or like I go through this process where if I don't separate myself from consuming too much, that I'll lose my touch with my creativity.
Absolutely. And that goes for anyone listening. You need to shift your mindset from a social media consumer to a social media producer. Even if you're not creating a bunch of content, you can use social media to spread light to the world. What if you posted an inspirational quote or something that helped people? But I totally get what you're saying because we are putting our energy into creating something great. But sometimes we are looking for inspiration. Other people, what are they doing? But the time that we put there is actually draining our energy. So we don't have the energy to actually go over here and create something because we did put all of our energy over there. So that is a tough balance because some people, they can inspire and help you with great ideas, but at the same time, that can drain you. So I think it goes back to, like you said, having the boundaries and going back to, you know what is the purpose behind me even putting this content out? The purpose behind this podcast and the people you can help and really anchoring back into that. And that's something that I do even to this day. Like my brand became the Mindset Doctor. So that is an avatar of who I am. So I can know if I'm showing up as Justin Mosley or if the Mindset Doctor's showing up because I can be tired, exhausted. I could be on podcasts back to back all day. And as Justin, I'm drained, I'm lack of energy, all the things. But I know the Mindset Doctor showing up to make a difference to someone who's listening. Even if it's one person, I've got a chance to impact that person and change their entire world. So when I channel the Mindset Doctor, I show up completely differently. So that's one of the things that helps me is creating. And Todd Herman wrote a book on that, Alter Ego. Like Beyonce has Sasha Fierce, Bo Jackson back in the day channeled Jason from the horror movies. If you create this alter ego, and like, how would that person show up? That's one of the things I do every single day. How would the Mindset Doctor show up today?
I was just thinking of Beyonce as you were talking, so I'm glad you referenced her. It's so important, especially for people who own a business, and I know plenty of people who listen to this podcast do, is that I began to shift the last year or so with my business of thinking of what is the soul of the business? What does the spirit look like? What does the spirit act like? How do I infuse that in everything that I'm doing and ensure that my purpose is clear, my heart is clear, just the way I show up is consistent and with this pure expression of love and care and empowerment. And so it's definitely important to think about whether you have a business or not. Maybe that's how you show up in your relationships, how you show up in your, kids' lives. What does that version of you do? And how do we tap into that version? Maybe when you're tapped out, but you still got to go to the softball game tonight, or you still have to, attend whatever it is you have to attend. How do you tap into that energy of maybe the alter ego version of you so that you can show up in your best light and your best way possible? I love that.
Yeah, I love that. And that goes back to the living by intention, not by default. Because it's easy to go into default mode. I'm tired. I've got to go to another sports game. It's after school. It's the end of the day. I'm exhausted. Just can't wait to get this over with and get home. Well, one of the examples I like to use, I go to a lot of seminars. I'm speaking at a conference this week in Atlanta. And so there's different perspectives. One, you could just go to a conference and just show up and see what happens. Oh, I'm sure I'm going to get some great information. I'm just going to show up. Level 2, I can show up, I can take a bunch of notes and make sure I take 3 nuggets back that I'm going to apply to my business. Step 3, I'm going to show up, I'm going to take notes, get those nuggets, but I'm going to intentionally connect with 3 or 4 different people and create a relationship. And then the next level, you do all of that, but then also any speakers that speak to me, that just have a message that helps me, I'm going to reach out to them and create a relationship with them. So all of those are different levels of intention, but the person that shows up with that last intention is going to have a completely different experience than the person, I'm just going to show up and see what happens. So when we start providing intention with every single move. Maybe it's going to the soccer game at the end of the day. You know what? Maybe if I could just connect with one of the other moms, maybe she's having a rough day. Maybe she's exhausted and doesn't want to be here, but I can lift her up and give her energy. And what I found is when you start lifting other people up, it lifts you up. So start looking for those moments where you can be intentional.
I'm a firm believer that everything we put out comes back to us. And that's actually a mantra of mine, especially with kindness, with love and finances, even everything I put out, it comes back to me. It comes back to me tenfold. And so it helps me shape every connection that I make and every relationship that I work on, knowing that I'm actually gaining whatever from this interaction. I'm not losing it, because that people pleaser in me had the belief that I had to sacrifice myself to help someone. So there's a very different, if we're talking about intention and we're talking about limiting beliefs, there's a different intention that now comes into those interactions where I can serve somebody and I don't have to feel personally depleted by it.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I love that principle too. Whatever you put out is coming back to you. The law of reaping and sowing. There's harvests where you're going to reap and you're going to sow. The thing is, and for everyone listening, sometimes we're like, but I didn't get something back from this. You go into it, I'm going to give to this person and they should give me back and repay it. That's not how this works. You just sow and it's going to come back to you some way else. Like where you're least expecting it is how it comes back to you. So don't get frustrated. You could sow into someone and maybe they completely do something against you. That's okay. You sowed it. It's going to come back to you somewhere else. So don't get caught up on a transactional relationship. Where I sow, I should reap. No, just sow the seeds and keep sowing and show up and sow, and the harvest will come, but it will come the way you least expect it.
Yeah, I think that's the cool thing about working with the universe too, is that when you're doing things with good intention and they come back, it's like, I didn't even see that coming. That was just better than I thought it could be. And the cool thing about the way things can come back to you is that there are things you couldn't possibly dream up on your own.
Exactly. Yeah, we limit ourselves. Yeah, but when we're open to possibility, and that goes back to the community too. You talked about earlier, having people around you, because people ask me all the time, like when it comes to goal setting, should I tell people about my goals? And the answer is yes and no. If you tell the wrong people about your goals, they'll tell you all the reasons why you shouldn't go after that. You could never achieve that, all the things. But if you have the right people around you and you tell them about your goals, they're going to encourage you, inspire you, empower you, connect you to other people that actually help you achieve your goals faster. And that's part of just connecting with the right people that are in alignment with who you are and who you're becoming. Man, it's going to fast track things for you for sure.
That's been a total game changer for me this year, is connecting with people who I look up to, who, inspire me. I think I went from working in a wellness center to working by myself all the time. So I moved from New York to South Carolina, and I owned a wellness center in New York. And when I moved here, I was like, okay, I'll just, do sessions over the phone or Zoom. And it's been fine, but I didn't realize how deeply I was missing community and how it impacts me on like a personal level of feeling seen and feeling valued when I do that and feeling inspired. You can get cut short in inspiration if you're not surrounding yourself with people who make you grow or question you. I know Justin Shank is a mutual friend of ours, and he's somebody who will be like, well, why'd you do that for? And it's loving. It's not, it's a little bit of a bruiser, but it's a loving way of having somebody say, well, why don't you do this? It might be a better fit. And it's not in a criticism way. It's in a inspirational, here's how I see that you can improve. And it's helpful on so many different levels to have people in your life who are cheering you on and people in your life who are pushing you to be better by challenging you a bit.
Yeah, because entrepreneurship is a lonely place. And even being online and producing content and being on Zoom calls with people, podcasts, we connect with people, but it's not a true connection. Like having those people that you can do life with, that can lift you up, because relationships are rocket ships. Like they do inspire you, they give you energy, all the things, but you got to be intentional with creating those relationships. Otherwise, that could be one of those busy versus productive things. You can have a bunch of calls with people and have a bunch of stuff on the books. But if it's not an intentional, like, hey, let's go decompress. Let's talk about life, talk about helping each other. Like that's where things change. So yes, definitely being intentional with the relationships, because relationships are rocket ships. Like you never know where they're going to take you. In fact, like that's how I even met Justin Shank. Like I spoke at an event that he was speaking at because somebody else invited me to speak at the event because I spoke at somebody else's event. It was like we're just all connected through this world. And then we ended up going out and Justin and I hung out, and he's an amazing dude. And he had me on his podcast. He was on mine. And because of that, I met you. It's like, if we're not showing up and sowing these seeds, we're missing out on opportunities.
Yeah, I think it's easy to get distracted by the online world, in terms of we think we're connecting, we think we're building relationships and getting in person and harvesting those connections as well, like building in and feeding into those connections as well is so important. This is such a good conversation. I am deeply enjoying it. And I think this is going to positively impact so many people. Do you have any last words of wisdom or things on your heart that you feel called to share today?
Yeah, I would say that we know about routines, the importance of habits and routines. And most people talk about a powerful morning routine. And I believe morning routines are great, but morning routines set up your day. Your evening routine sets up your life. So what you're putting into your mind before you fall asleep, are you fall asleep worrying about the things that might happen tomorrow? Mark Twain has a quote. I shared it in my TED talk that I lived a life of many troubles. Most of them never happened. Like we're worrying about the things around us that could go wrong. Instead, before you fall asleep, take advantage of the brain waves. Throughout the day, we're in high beta, getting things done, and our brain waves start to drop into alpha, theta, and then delta. As you're starting to get really tired, if you start affirming who you are, you create a mental scene of who you want to become and rehearse that in your mind before you fall asleep. And it doesn't have to take a lot of time, but that one thing can completely change your life. In fact, I actually have, if you go to mindshiftlinks.com, I've got what's called the baseball technique, which is a cool technique that you can do to help prime your subconscious mind as you fall asleep. So it's actually a way that you could do this to get better at priming it, to get better at manifesting in your life. So that's one of the most powerful things. Take advantage of your subconscious mind, pouring into that before you fall asleep. Because as you fall asleep, your subconscious mind processes what you put into it right before you fall asleep.
I love that. I'm big on like sleep hypnosis and everything. So I'll make sure to link that in the show notes. And I know people are going to want to follow you, connect with you. What's the best way for them to do that?
Yep. So I could just mention mindshiftlinks.com. It's got a bunch of free resources there. Other than that, connect with me on Instagram at Dr. Justin Mosley. Would love to hear if something that I said spoke to you, reach out. That's why we do this. We want to make sure, hey, we're making an impact in the world. Definitely let Nicole know because she's putting out her own information that's amazing, but then having other guests, she wants feedback on that too. Like we want to know, hey, we're making a difference here. So would love to hear from you. And then check out my TED Talk too. And on YouTube, just put in Justin Mosley. And I would love, anyone to support me on that too.
And I will link all of that in the show notes. Yes. And I answer my DMs. So a lot of people like don't approach you and I because they're like, oh, they don't answer. I answer every single DM unless it's
right. Yeah. Me too. And that's, I think, the power there too, just making the connection. You never know who you'll meet. And some people have other people that are like a VA overseas just answering DMs. But I think people start to see through that too. So by having real people that you can access that want to see you live a better life, like definitely reach out.
Yeah, that's the goal, is to help you wherever you're at in your journey and in your comeback journey. I'm so grateful that you took time to stop by today. And I know that people got so much out of this. And so thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to get a copy of my latest book, Rock Your Comeback, The Down to Earth Guide to Reclaiming Your Power, just about everywhere books are sold. Join the Comeback Club for exclusive access, masterclasses, and more. And I always love to know what you think, so make sure to shoot me a DM or leave me a review. Thanks for listening to the Rock Your Comeback podcast. I hope you're feeling inspired, motivated, and ready to take on the world. Now go step back into your power. The world's been waiting for you. But first, if you could, leave me a review or share with a friend. Thank you.